Afternoon and good morning, everyone, depending on the time zone that you're in. My name is Johan Juven, and I'm the president of the Institute for Educational Leadership in Washington, D.C., a 54-year-old nonprofit organization focused on developing and supporting leaders and expanding innovation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar focused on the Adult Career Pathways Design Challenge. And before I turn it over to my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves, I need to thank our partners. First of all, I want to thank the ECMC Foundation from Los Angeles for their generous support for this initiative. I also want to thank our colleagues at COABE for their great partnership, as well as our colleagues and friends and supporters at the National Association of State Directors for Adult Education. Finally, I also need to thank Full Capacity Marketing from California for an outstanding job in helping us get to this very point of our launch last week and also our webinar today. So I'm going to ask our partners to briefly introduce themselves now, and I'll start with Maggie. Maggie?
Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie Snyder, and I'm a program officer at the ECMC Foundation. Our portfolio is interested in connecting adults to short-term training, credentialed training, accredited up to the associate degree level. And so Johan and I brainstormed this idea about a year ago, and we're really thinking about how we could leverage what is happening in communities from the grassroots level to have solutions really coming from the bottom up to create pathways to post-secondary success in the long run. We're really excited about collaborating with you all and with IEL and the other partners, and look forward to its success. Thanks, Johan.
Thank you, Maggie. Sharon, why don't you introduce yourself and COABE?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Bonney, and I'm the Executive Director for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, known as COABE. And we're delighted to be partnering with IEL and the state directors and Full Capacity Marketing. Johan and I have had a really great work relationship for a number of years, so we were just delighted when we were able to connect on this. And our role really is the dissemination partner. So we're really the ones who are spreading the word and getting the word out in the adult ed community and beyond.
Thank you, Sharon. And Pat?
Hi, my name is Pat Butler. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of State Directors of Adult Education, and I'm really delighted to be a partner in this exciting program. Our organization represents state directors and state administrative staff that are administering the adult education program in every state in the United States, and we think this is a great way to innovate programming that will help the student population that the directors serve. So thanks so much for inviting me to join this collaboration. And I want to introduce now Selena Shands of Full Capacity Marketing, who has worked with us, as Johan mentioned, on getting this campaign promoted, getting the word out, and working on this webinar. So Full Capacity Marketing has received over 50 global awards for adult and workforce campaigns, and they're doing a great job for us. So Selena?
Thanks so much, Pat, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm Selena Shands. I'm the CEO and founder of Full Capacity Marketing, and we have a lot of passion for what you all do. Our firm is nationally based, and we work in helping you build a great brand in your community and to really elevate the message of your mission, which is so important. I'm so honored to be working on this particular campaign, and just really want to thank everyone on the call for joining us. And I know why you're on the call too, because if you have seen the press release, there are going to be 3 $100,000 winners to be selected for designing innovative adult learner education and training models through this Minds That Move initiative. And so we're going to talk about that today and all what it's about so that you'll be ready to prepare your teams and have a chance at the prize money. Also, too, this is just the first of many sort of strategies we have lined up for communicating with you in the field. We definitely will talk about next steps. There will be FAQs posted on our website, and the website is mindsthatmoveus.org if you want to check that out for lots of great information. The other thing, too, is as we move through the webinar today, feel free to use the chat box as we move along in the process. We may stop at certain points and check in if you have questions, and we will definitely do a formal Q&A at the conclusion. And lastly, the webinar will be posted on the website. So with that, let's get started. And Johan, I know you said you and Maggie were really kind of brainstorming you know, this whole sort of vision that you have. If we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what is the whole Minds That Move Us initiative and your vision for this.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. I think I'm going to make two points here. One is about Minds That Move Us, and secondly, I want to talk specifically about the Career Pathways Design Challenge. So, the Institute for Educational Leadership went through what I call a strategic renewal process when I joined the organization 16 months ago. And as a result of that renewal process, we made a commitment to improve equity in the communities that we're affiliated with. We have deep relationships with about 300 communities across the country. And we said we're going to get to greater equity in two ways. One is we're going to do that through leadership development, the development and support and mobilization of community leaders. And secondly, we said that we were going to do that by stepping up our innovation game, innovation both in policy and in program areas, because we realized that there are too many populations that actually do not benefit from the incredible economic recovery that we have witnessed over the last couple of years. And we've also seen that there are entire communities that actually are overlooked or not being part of the prosperity renaissance, if you will, that is benefiting some but not all Americans. So that's where this idea of sort of Minds That Move Us came from, and we're very grateful to you, Selena, and your team for helping us sort of name this bigger idea of creating a number of innovation challenges into the future. Now, we're here mostly to talk about this incredible first challenge, which is indeed the direct outcome of a number of conversations that I had with Maggie and her colleagues at the ECMC Foundation. And the idea was basically based on looking at what is the evidence in terms of the experience that adults have when they go or try to go into post-secondary education and training. And we concluded that many of these experiences, particularly if you're a low-income adult, are actually not that positive. And we also talked about, so what are some of the promising models? And that list was so short that we said, well, here's a clear sort of program need. There's a real gap in practice here. And we talked more, and then we said, how can we respond to this? And I don't remember who said it first, but said maybe we can do some type of challenge. And that's where the idea of this Adult Career Pathways Design Challenge sort of was born. And I have to say, I've worked with many funders, but this level of collaboration and thought partnership and mutual support with the ECMC Foundation was most certainly extraordinary and so appreciated. So, Selena, that's sort of the two-part story behind Minds That Move Us and the Adult Career Pathways Design Challenge.
Well, I love the fact that you all are going to, you know, this is going to be the first challenge that we talk about today, but we're certainly encouraging continuing funding of this so we can address challenges across the nation. What I love about the whole frame up of Minds That Move Us is that you guys as a team really decided that, you know what, to collaborate, you have to collaborate to do any kind of innovation. And at IEL, as you are upping up your game on innovation and leadership in both policy and programs, this is a great way to sort of kick it off. And what I also like about the whole concept is that the whole thing is driven by market demands, meaning that we can't leave anybody behind. We know that. We've got these young youth and adult learners that we know we have to get into the workforce. We have to help them achieve their personal and their professional goals. So let's sort of go in there, Johan, and talk. Sharon, if you can go to the next slide. And since it takes diversity in minds to really solve broad-based community challenges, Johan, how do you see, who participates in the challenge?
I think in this challenge, as I think in any other sort of initiative where one is really trying to solve a significant gap in either policy or practice, we always have to think about who are the people who will be affected by either the policy or the program that we're about to design or create. So the students, the learners themselves are a very important constituent in this challenge and in all of the other innovation work that we're doing for that matter. The second sort of constituent group includes business and industry. Without employers, without a representative from the demand side, it's going to be really challenging to create a new design or experience that will ultimately result in there being an individual who can meet the skill requirements that the employer has, and at the same time will have had a job opportunity that pays, that helps pay the bills, if I can use that expression. Now, in addition to that, as the slides represent, there are many other important constituents displayed there. I won't read them all, you can see it, but there's folks from the education world, from the workforce development, from community-based organizations. And in many instances, it's helpful to have some government representation as well, whether that's a tribal government, a city or a town, a county government, and in some instances, as is the case with our challenge now, state governments will be most certainly important partners. The key idea, though, behind having this type of constituent participants is the whole notion that in education we cannot solve this set of issues by ourselves. We really need a cross-sector approach, and as you can see in the graphic, there are multiple sectors reflected here that need to be at the table to make this really work.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And, especially in this first challenge where we're talking about, Sharon, if you can go to the next slide, the adult career pathway design. And let's talk about this first challenge a little bit. I know this is something that Sharon, you and Pat really have a lot of passion for, and there's for good reason. Maybe you can come on and share with us a little bit about your thoughts on this first design that we're asking folks to respond to.
Great, I'd be happy to. And I just also want to make sure that Pat, are you there? I know you were going to contribute to this slide as well.
Absolutely, I am here.
Okay, great. So we're delighted. As you know, we're a partner in this project, and this project really will focus on innovations for adult learners who do not have any formal post-secondary training or education. So, that's really our wheelhouse. That's what COABE's all about. Pat, did you want to talk about this slide?
Yeah, I think this Career Pathways Design Challenge, it's offering a platform for innovation of career pathways program design, which is a design that has really proved effective for adults. And I think the design challenge is going to increase the opportunities to have good models for programs that offer adults additional opportunities to get the education and training they need to fully participate in today's economy. And again, the old style of education first and then job training second is not proven to be as effective as integrating the education with the job training. So, there are some models, but to offer a platform at this point in time for additional innovation is actually excellent. So this challenge brings together a national network of experienced career pathways professionals who can assist with teams with the design of the innovative projects, and to have a team working from the ground up and deciding what is necessary for their community, what jobs are important in their community, what career pathways are available. I think this is just going to be a great opportunity.
Okay, thank you so much. Sharon, if we can go to the next slide, we've really talked about, you know, the what and the who participates. Now let's talk about the why a little bit. And, you know, for sure in this challenge, we want to break through the boundaries in thinking, and maybe you've been thinking about having some idea about how you could transform your community, maybe with low-skilled adults. Maybe you've wanted to test out an idea and said, wow, you know, this is really outside of the box, but this challenge is going to give our community an opportunity to come together to build these public-private partnerships in a way we've never done before. And that's what we're really looking for, is what are those innovative, really out-of-the-box ideas that are going to solve some very complex challenges in your community. As Pat said, there's a lot of components to this. You're going to have support along the way. And Maggie and her team have really worked with Johan and Alicia to make sure to set up the systems to do that. So you're going to have access to national subject matter experts and coaches, and a lot of great tools along the way as we learn from you and from each other. So, and of course that prize money is looming very big, Alicia, as we bring you on board now to really start talking about this three-step process. And Sharon, if you can go to the next slide. I loved how you guys framed this up, Alicia, and I know in our strategy sessions, you're like, you know, it's really about three things. It's about engaging, educating, and excelling. The whole concept of engaging these different teams that Johan was speaking to in the public-private arenas, coming together and having that diverse mind. And then educating, really understanding the expectations of this particular challenge in the adult career pathway design. And lastly, excelling, and that, of course, is pertaining to the scoring rubric. Everybody wants to know how to win that prize money. So, Alicia, I'm going to turn it over to you to go into the next part and on the next slide and talk about some of the challenge components and what folks can expect.
Great, thank you, Selena. So welcome and hello to everyone who's joined us. We thank you. My name is Alicia Bolton. I'm the director for the project, and you know, I work alongside with Johan and our partners here, and we really are so excited about this challenge for a number of reasons, some of which have already been shared. But this is really an opportunity for this field, and I say that to include educators, students, business and industry partners, community organizations, et cetera, to really think outside of the box. Think of those adults in your communities who perhaps have just, you know, not been able to secure the post-secondary credentials, and maybe in some cases even secondary credentials that they need to get onto a long-lasting and successful and lucrative career path. So this challenge, obviously, as Johan mentioned, is about bringing together teams of different constituent groups to really think about how to address those barriers that prevent adult students from not only entering, but persisting and completing career pathway programs successfully. So in addition to the huge carrot of $100,000, which gets everybody excited, there are also some other really important benefits that we want folks to know about. Number one is the design camp, which is slated to occur in the first week of August. We'll have some more details about the exact city and timing, hopefully as soon as next week. But it's a 2.5-day experience where we're going to be bringing in the 10 selected teams to hear from subject matter experts on a range of topics. So everything from how to braid and blend different funding streams to how to recruit and think about wraparound supports for the students that you're supporting and everything in between. So this will be an opportunity for teams to come together, work together as a team to fine-tune their ideas, but then also hear from other teams across the country and thought partners across the country, so that coming out of that experience, they have a very polished idea that can be further cultivated with the assistance of a coach, which we will also be providing throughout the experience. Every team will have the opportunity to be paired with a coach over the cycle, over the 3-year project term. And through that experience, through that coaching process, we're expecting the coaches to ask really difficult questions of the teams, to push their thinking and to think about how to create models that aren't just going to, programs that won't just be around for a year or 2, but really have the opportunity to be sustainable. And as Johan mentioned, really add to the list of promising models that can be further replicated down the road. So again, the design camp, that's the very early benefit that's taking place at the beginning of August. Roughly a year from that time, there will be what we're calling a Career Pathway Festival, which is another exciting opportunity for the teams, after having worked with their coaches for roughly a year at that point, to pitch their polished ideas to a panel of expert judges that are going to come from a cross-sector of industry and education and innovation labs, as well as a live audience, to get real feedback on the programmatic solutions that they've developed. We'll also be inviting foundations and other types of funders to that event. So it will also be an opportunity for teams to potentially even secure implementation funding to get their ideas off the ground. So that's a really exciting point in the project for us. We've jokingly called it a mix between Shark Tank and what's the other? America's Got Talent. So you have to bring your A game for that, everyone out there. But it's a great opportunity to showcase the hard work that teams will have done up to that point. And then coming out of the festival, there will be an opportunity for the top 10 teams to do a brief application to be considered for the $100,000. So, you know, taking into consideration all of the feedback that's come out of the festival, our expectation is that teams will use that feedback, apply it, and then the very top 3 winners will be selected to win the $100,000, which, as we've indicated on the website, you know, there's really no restrictions on that. However, we do we do hope that teams will consider using it for implementation or other ways to directly benefit the communities and programs that they'll be serving. So that's it in a nutshell, but we really try to think comprehensively about this project and, you know, to think about how we can get the very best ideas and incentivize them. And so between the Design Camp Festival and, of course, the $100,000, as well as a virtual community of practice that we'll be developing, we really think that we've we've done a good job, and we think that we'll get some great ideas as a result.
Well, Alicia, you're already getting some great ideas in the chat room. So people are excited, and we're going to get to all of your questions. We're going to handle one more slide, and then we're going to get to some of these folks who are asking posing some different questions, but let's talk about like team composition and functions there, and then we'll get into some possible ideas. Sure.
So, you know, teams are going to be tackling lots of issues, some of which you've already heard about. You know, obviously they'll need to, with the consultation of an employer partner or students and so forth, need to be thinking about things like curriculum and alignment to industry demands and skills. They'll also be thinking about how to recruit and retain their student population. And so the very best teams will have very diverse perspectives on how to design, implement, and then maintain a program over the long term. And so, you know, a sample team could include something like a program administrator, an educator, or an employer. We've already talked about the importance of having student voice, and so we're hoping to see adult students who are also part of teams. Community organizations and government agencies, you know, we see these as being critical players as well to really help teams think through the wraparound support aspect of programs. we know that many times adults are not able to complete programs, not necessarily because they don't want to, but because life gets in the way. So maybe that's childcare, maybe that's housing, maybe that's a healthcare issue. And so, you know, having different parties at the table to think through these very difficult issues is going to be absolutely critical. And so, you know, we don't want teams to limit themselves. I mean, what we've presented on screen and on our website is really just an example. We want there to be innovation in the team composition as well.
Yeah, it's such a good point about, you know, diversity, and that's what really your brand is about. It's like minds that move us. It's not in a vacuum. It's really pulling all these public-private partners together to say, you know, what are the real issues on the ground and what's out there? What are the gaps? And then how can we, through this innovation, really solve it? So let's go to the next slide and talk about some ideas and some sample innovations. And we've got a great question from Tammy Brown, who says, would adult populations with language barriers be eligible candidates for this challenge, like adult ESL students? She says, what if they have a degree from another country, but it's not really helping them succeed? Does that post-secondary degree make them ineligible? Thoughts on that, Alicia?
So those are, I'm getting a little bit of background noise. I don't know if everybody can just double check that they're on mute. Great, thank you. So those are the exact types of issues and challenges that we want teams to grapple with. We know that whether, you know, there are immigrants coming to this country, there are incarcerated individuals, there are homeless individuals, people with disabilities, both visible and invisible, who oftentimes get left out. And so this is an opportunity for teams across the country to think about how to serve those populations. And so, you know, on screen, you'll see, you know, there are some features that we're hoping all of the teams will consider as they're coming up with their ideas. But, you know, we want there to be some kind of connection to growing and emerging occupations in that community that pays sustaining wages. So we're not looking to promote underemployment. We're looking for an opportunity for the people who participate in these programs to really get onto a career pathway where there is room for advancement and growth. Another aspect that we're thinking about is post-secondary education. And, you know, in some cases, as you know, the question alludes to, there may be people who are coming from different countries who have credentials. Well, you know, for that team, the challenge could be how to figure out how to get recognition for that expertise and the credentials that people may be bringing to the table, but for which they currently don't get any credit for. Secondly, you know, in the case that there may be students who are lacking secondary education credentials, creating some type of opportunity for them to secure those credentials as part of this program and in conjunction with securing post-secondary and industry credentials. We'd be excited to see, you know, innovations that consider that as well. We talked at length about just the importance of integrating education and training and having time to practice skills. So work-based learning is a critical component that we'd like to see, you know, where the innovation there could be, you know, maybe it's not in a traditional work setting as we've always thought about it, but maybe there's some type of virtual opportunity to simulate a work environment if geography or other barriers may be a problem. And then finally, in terms of academic and wraparound support, you know, this is where we, you know, an opportunity where we really want to see a lot of creativity, because as I mentioned before, it's oftentimes life that gets in the way of being able to complete education and training and then go after that job. So, you know, we're very excited to see how teams will think about creating or supporting the entire student so that they truly can be successful.
Great answer. And Netta here, I believe you really answered this in your response, but just to kind of put this out there, she says, you know, our organization serves highly skilled refugees and special immigrant visa holders. you know, who are in their home countries, like doctors, lawyers, et cetera, who are now working in low-skilled jobs. So is this demographic still eligible for the challenge?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if there's one point that I just can't underscore enough, it's that we want people to be thinking about those populations that have gone under the radar, oftentimes been neglected. We want to see the creative ways that teams will think about resolving the barriers that they face. So from our perspective, there's no population that is, you know, not in the running or can't be considered. We want to encourage people to think very outside of the box from that perspective as well.
Okay, great. And one last idea who's coming in from Maria. She goes, you know, in Illinois, their ESL classes, they also include math. What about adding American history in order to educate students about the country they are living in now? More of that citizenship kind of flavor to it.
I think that if that is an issue that population is facing, then absolutely. Because again, you know, we go back to the point of this. The point of this project is to grow the list of promising models and practices. And so, you know, from that lens, there's nothing that really is off the table. And we encourage teams to be as creative as possible and to really push the bounds of what we're doing currently today.
Okay, great. So, you know, let's go to the next slide, and maybe this will also give folks some perspective on, well, I think you've talked about this quite a bit. Is there anything here you want to cover? Alicia, do you want to go through this a little bit more on sample innovations and models?
Sure. You know, I won't touch on every point here, but I think, you know, I'll just reiterate the point that not only is no population or no group off the table, but no problem off the table, but we want teams to be thinking about very creatively about how to address them. So technology has huge potential in this space, and we want teams to be thinking about how they can integrate that into the solutions that they propose. You know, we also want teams to be thinking about how to more effectively use time, right? So when you think about the idea of stackable and aggregated learning experiences, it's all about how to seamlessly create a path where a student can earn, you know, in you know, one credential and that leads to the next, and that eventually allows them to grow and excel in their career path. You know, when you talk about expedited credential attainment, well, you know, things like competency-based assessments, micro-credentials, they're all approaches that are aimed at using time more effectively from a student perspective. And so, you know, I would just, you know, we would just say to all the teams out there, everybody who's thinking about putting together a proposal, think outside of the box. Think about all the things that you know are barriers for the student population that you're trying to serve, and think about how you can create a program where they can get the skills that they need, the supports that they need in the most time-effective manner. And so these are just, you know, a small sample of some of the features that teams could consider, but we certainly don't want them to limit themselves to just this list.
Yeah, so like Jesse just weighed in and talked about his high-functioning autistic students in GED classes and how they have difficulty getting to class and taking a test, even if they apply for accommodations during the test. So that's certainly a barrier, you know, within that special population. So a lot of, you know, ideas generating here, Alicia, as you're talking through some of these models.
Absolutely.
So there are a couple of other questions in here, but they really pertain to step 3. And I think this is an interesting slide because it's all about the scoring rubric. You know, we're going to set this up. We've identified the idea, but now what do you really count as kind of an innovation, if you will?
So an innovation is you know, it's something we've never seen before, or maybe we've seen it in some respect, but it hasn't been perfected, if you will. There's room for, or growth for our, you know, there's room for improvement. So, you know, we don't want to just see the traditional types of approaches that we always see. We want to, you know, see populations that haven't been served before. We want to see creative solutions to address the problems that they may face. So, you know, so we're looking for things that we haven't seen before, that perhaps haven't worked before, but could work if there were some really bold changes to them. Collectively, as you can see on the screen, you know, first and foremost, we need to be able to understand what the idea is that's being pitched, which is why that innovation description is going to be really critical. We're anticipating getting lots of applications, and so, you know, this is your opportunity to give us like that 15-second elevator pitch that we all have practiced at many points in our career, so that we can clearly understand what's being proposed, who it will help, and why it's just that different. That also feeds into the ingenuity component. You know, what is it that makes it different from existing approaches and programs that are out there? Who's on your team? What are the strengths that they bring to the table? And in particular, how do those strengths complement one another? So we talked about the importance of having an employer partner and a student voice and community organizations and educators. So, you know, together, that's a very powerful team. And we want to understand, you know, what the roles are of the people that comprise the team, what the relevant skills are, and again, how they blend together. You know, in terms of capacity, you know, we want to understand that there's commitment on the part of that team to not just come to the design camp, but to really, you know, commit to being involved in this project over the entire span. So that's through the design festival, through the application process for the $100,000, and then after that, getting the idea to the point where it can hopefully be implemented. So we want to understand the capacity that teams bring to the table from that perspective. And then finally, you know, we want to understand, you know, what are the outcomes you're striving for? You know, when you have this idea, so what's going to be different for the lives of the students who participate in it? So, you know, we posted the questions online so that everybody, you know, understands fully what we're asking for. But you'll see, for those folks who haven't viewed it yet, that we asked some very specific questions on what the goals are, at least from an aspirational point that you're striving to achieve. Now, obviously, we understand that through the design camp and the coaching process, some of that may evolve over time, and that's what we hope. But these are some of the characteristics, or criteria that we're going to be judging the submissions on. And then lastly, I'll just say about technical assistance, and this is an important point to make. We want to see a pretty broad diversity of ideas and teams, but we're not expecting teams to know everything at the beginning. We're not expecting them to have all the answers. This is a learning process for everybody involved, and I think that's partly where the innovation will come from. If everybody had the answers to everything, we wouldn't need a challenge like this. And so, you know, for folks out there on the line who maybe have done some of this work in the past, but, you know, don't feel as connected or as resourced as some of the larger players that are out there, we don't want people to be discouraged by that. We want the boldest and best ideas to come forth, and that may come from anywhere. So, you know, through the sets of questions related to technical assistance, we want people to be very candid in answering them and telling us what they need so that we can make appropriate plans for the design camp as well as the festival, and then match teams appropriately to their coach.
Oh, that's great. So we've got a couple of questions here, Alicia. One person saying, okay, let's say, you know, you've done all the scoring rubric and we're in the top 10. So how do we know we're going to be invited, kind of when that's going to take place? And then let's say they move into 4th position. They didn't quite make the top 3. Is there going to be any financial support for those that rank 4 through 10?
Sure. So in terms of notification, we do have a very tight timeline. We're hoping that we're planning for the design camp to occur in early August, which gives us about 3 weeks to review and score and decide on who the top 10 participants are going to be. So one of the questions that we ask people to respond to is, who is the team lead? Who is that person that is going to be the point of contact for IEL and our partners? And that's going to be very important to know, because if you are one of the 10 teams, you will be getting a call certainly no later than July 20th to be informed about that. And then there will be a tight turnaround to confirm that your team will be able to participate in the design camp, and then also to make your travel arrangements. So we're talking about probably a 2 to 3 business day turnaround for notification. Again, and it's that tight because we're striving for early August as being the week of the design camp. In terms of what happens if you rank 3rd or 4th, well, and you're not one of the top 3, our goal, especially through the Career Pathway Festival, is to invite funders to that event. And so there will be an opportunity, again, to pitch your ideas. And what we're hoping is that the funders who are there and able to participate, that they'll see ideas that they like, and that may be from the top 3, or it might not be, as part of the coaching process. And then probably also as part of the design camp, we'll also have we'll spend some time thinking about how to cultivate funding for your idea, so that it's not just an idea that can never go someplace. So I hope that helps. But our goal is to really create some access points for funders and the teams that participate.
So, Alicia, what about travel to the design camp? Is there support there for teams to get to the design camp?
Yes, this is an all expense paid event. So we anticipate, obviously covering, flight, train, hotel, or if you're close enough to drive by car, gas, as well as hotel, and food. So we really wanted to remove all the barriers that could prevent teams from being able to successfully participate.
Okay, great. There's a couple of questions in here on deadlines, which we're going to get to in our final slide, but I want to loop back around because there's a couple of questions. Folks are still thinking through, maybe some potential ideas. And one question came in, it says, do you consider integrated education and training career pathway bridge programs, like for example in Chicago or Minnesota's Fast Track as an example, to still be innovative, or are these now considered just kind of existing approaches?
I'll take a stab at that, and then I'll turn it over to Johan, who can expound. I think that for existing approaches, we want to see those taken to the next level. Again, the idea behind this project is really to add to the list of promising practices. So if there's, some evidence that it's already working, and, then that's not as exciting to us as something that is perhaps either brand new or maybe hasn't been working but needs to fundamentally kind of be flipped on its head in order to work. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Johan, who can probably, add to that, but that will be my initial response.
It's a great question. And integrated education and training initiatives were an innovation a couple of years ago. But there are some differences, though, I think, in terms of what our colleagues at ECMC and our teams at the various partner agencies that envision. One is this focus on adults 26 and older. That's a population that often is not as successful in persisting in post-secondary education and training experiences. And I'm not sure what the track record is of these integrated and education and training programs for that age group, but that's definitely sort of one consideration. The second thing is these programs have to produce credentials, whether they're education or industry required, whatever the credentials are, that actually have labor market currency, so that people with the credentials or the skill certifications that they get can actually get to a higher level of employment and income. And so if you sort of look at the broader career pathway construct and integrated education and training programs, I see integrated education and training programs to be a segment of that pathway. What we're interested in is innovation in the whole construct of career pathways, whether that's an accelerated path for those individuals or a newly supported path through technology or intensive wraparound services. So that's a second sort of key distinction. And the third one, I have to say, we're interested in learner voice. We're interested in, you know, customer-centered design here. We don't want people to design programs for these adult learners because they don't have the same lived experiences as many of these adult learners. So the use of the learner's voice in creating the design specifications of your innovation is critical, and that is not always the case when we look at existing integrated education and training programs.
Right. So Johan, this is a really good question that came in, you know, especially since you're talking about customer-centric design with the adult learner, and also the fact that you're very keen on technology. We have a question here. It says, I'm a little bit concerned about technology because my students come from very poor backgrounds and they don't even have computers. So how do you think they might handle that?
Well, you know, a great way to innovate in this space is to create a learning experience where people would not have to face those particular expenditures and where that access could be made available. This question reminds me of a recent partnership that the Institute for Educational Leadership and Everyone On established, where we're allowing the parents who have children in our community schools across the country to access no or low cost high-speed internet access and the opportunity to purchase high-end devices at very, very low cost. So there might be an innovation here, perhaps in a new kind of partnership that that a local community might consider, either with a communications provider agency or with a nonprofit intermediary such as Everyone On to address that particular issue. But that's actually a great example of sort of what the innovation could be relative to that cost issue, which is a significant equity issue for many of the adults we're talking about.
Exactly, and it's also maybe a business case for support in the private sector. If the students are too poor for computers or don't have that access, how can maybe businesses provide in-kind donations or financial support to alleviate that issue in the community? So, you know, really thinking through, okay, if this isn't a barrier, then how do we get around it? One of the questions are around existing programs looking to expand types of services and maybe reworking pieces of existing programs. And Alicia, I think you've really talked about this a lot. It's like, you know, the question would be, why then? You know, why do you need to rework pieces of an existing program? What issue is it going to solve? What are your thoughts there, Alicia?
I mean, I would say that, you know, there's always room for growth. And so, you know, there's a need for, you know, this type of challenge and this type of, you know, opportunity so that we can radically improve outcomes for the students that we're trying to serve. You know, we don't want to just kind of tap around the surface or the border. We really want to see some meaningful change for the lives of the students that may participate in these programs. And so I think that's why it's necessary, because we all know, if we look into our communities, if we look, you know, even into our families, there are adults over the age of 26 who are struggling. And I think that, you know, when we can make a difference in their lives, we can make a difference in the lives of their families and in their communities.
Definitely. So speaking of the age of 26 and older, we have a question about what about high school graduates who don't have the opportunity maybe to go into post-secondary programs? Any thoughts there? Is this particular challenge stay within the 26 and older age range?
This is Johan. You know, as you probably have noticed when you look through the materials, we have tried to be as open and as flexible as possible around any aspect of this challenge. There is one exception. It cannot focus on folks younger than 26. That is an informed decision that our colleagues at the ECMC Foundation and our team sort of came to, because it is for that population in that age group, 26 and older, that many of the current models actually don't work very well. So there is tons of flexibility under this challenge, but that is the only area where there is no flexibility. So teams that come in with proposals for, you know, young high school graduates, I mean, I would be excited about the fact that they would submit an innovation, but it's not something that we would prioritize for the selection of the 10 teams.
Okay, great. I know you mentioned the 26 and older population for this target specific challenge, really having difficulties and often sustaining livable wages. So we have a question here around, how do you define the living sustainable wage?
You know, I think that will vary very greatly by community, but I think we would be interested in hearing how people would define that. Minimum wage is not a family sustaining wage, you know, but I guess it would be very different in parts of Arizona than it would be in parts of New York. So I think people need to really ask themselves, what is an entry or sort of mid-level wage in this career pathway that would allow people to, at a minimum, support or sustain their families, and where there would be opportunity not just for career progression down the road, but actually for earnings growth. That's why the earlier point that you touched upon, Selena, and also Alicia mentioned briefly, of really looking at what are these occupations or emerging occupations in the labor markets of these communities or surrounding labor markets where that opportunity to make a living wage actually is a reality.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. I want to remind everyone that the webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on the website for download, as well as the Alicia and team will be constantly updating the frequently asked questions. So there are a lot of helpful resources on the website, which is again, mindsthatmoveus.org. I'd like to go into the final slide to talk about timelines because we had a few questions around when proposals were submitted and applications and all of that. And we also had a question around when coaches and experts might be hired. And then one other thing, when we talk about the application process, another question is, do specific partnerships, businesses need to be identified, or can it be just kind of generic? So maybe you can address those, Alicia, as we move into the timeline section.
Sure, and I think I got them all, but if I forget to address something, just let me know. So in terms of partnerships, I think, you know, your goal to the response is to help us understand, you know, what you're proposing, you know, to the greatest extent that you can. So if you give me a generic response, well, that gives me only a piece of the puzzle, only a piece of the idea that you're striving for. So I would encourage teams to include as much detail as possible for us to be able to understand, A, what is being proposed,
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. And Sharon, I'm sorry, I was just going to prompt you, Alicia, and have Sharon move to the next slide on next steps and timelines, because I think this will help get us to some of the questions around when applications are due, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So a big milestone and timeline deadline that people should be aware of is June 29th, which is the deadline for the submissions. The questions are posted on our website, but they have to actually be submitted through a survey tool that we're using. So you can find a link in the PowerPoint deck, but then also on the website. By July 20th, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, we anticipate being able to notify the 10 teams. It could be a little bit before that, if depending on the volume of applications that we get in, but we will be contacting the team lead person who is specified in your application. So be thoughtful in who you put down, because that's the one person who will be contacting to notify your team. Mm-hmm. In terms of that following week of July 23rd, that's when we're going to be expecting the teams that have been chosen to confirm their attendance and to make their travel plans. And then finally, by the week of the 6th, that's the target week for the design camp. It's a 2.5-day experience, so we're looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and we hope to be able to announce the city by early next week, the city and the actual venue by next week. The other key time frames are indicated in a PDF document online that you can access either through this deck or if you visit our website, which is mindsetmoveus.org.
Okay, great. And there are some comments here around folks wanting to help as subject matter experts and coaches and things like that. Can you share a little bit about what that process is like, Alicia, in terms of selection and time frame?
Sure. So we are currently doing all of the applications that have come in. We've not closed them down just yet. So, but we will be by, I would say, Wednesday of next week. So if you're out there and you're really interested in contributing either as a subject matter expert or as a coach or even an evaluator who we're looking to kind of chronicle, the lessons learned, if you will, that come out of this project, you still have time to submit using the links that are provided on the website. But in terms of making selections for the subject matter experts, we're hoping to do that by the probably 3rd week of June or so. And then the coaches, we will finalize as we're finalizing the teams, because it's very important to us that we get the right fit. So I go back and I stress the point of teams authentically answering the question around what their technical assistance needs are so that we can get that right match with a coach. So the coach selections then will be finalized around mid-July or so. But again, I would stress to them as well that, there will be a tight turnaround. I think that there will probably end up being some role for the coaches at the design camp. We have not figured out what that is just yet, but we do want them to be available and primed and ready to go either during the design camp or right after the design camp, because after it's over, the coaches will have the better part of a year to be working with their teams to get them ready for the Career Pathway Festival.
Okay, great. Just a couple of things to reiterate. Someone asked about, who will pay for the travel, and as Alicia alluded to earlier, travel to the design camp is included. I think we've answered one other question, was just how many folks are on the webinar. I think we had about 515 that signed up, and about 258, it looks like, are still hanging in there on the webinar. One other question by the timing, what if someone intends to submit to be a subject matter expert, but it's submitted in an innovation, but is also submitting an innovation? Is that an issue there? Can they apply for both?
Well, so what we have discussed internally is that you may apply to both, but you can only be selected for one. So, so if you see a role or could see a role for yourself as a subject matter and as a coach, please do apply. And vice versa, if you have an idea for you know, a programmatic solution, apply as well. But in the event that you would be selected to do all three, you have to choose, essentially.
Okay. And how many hours of coaching are going to be allowed for each of the teams? On average, we are at least currently anticipating that each team will have at least 24 hours. However, we are working to see if we can line up some additional resources so that we can grow that number over the life of the project. But that's a good point, because irrespective of that final number, we do, you know, want the coaches that are selected to be thinking outside of the box themselves on how to most effectively maximize the time that they do have with their team. It's not necessarily the case that all coaching interactions will be in person, so we want them to be thinking about virtual opportunities, or if there is a topic, let's say, that you know, multiple teams could benefit from, then, you know, how can we think about bringing all the teams together so, again, that we can maximize the coaching hours that are allotted. Okay, great. And is that through a year time frame, Alicia, that will take place, those coaching hours?
A lot of it will happen in between the design camp and festival, but then there will be some opportunities for some coaching post-festival as the teams prepare, you know, their applications to be considered for the $100,000.
And also, you're having a virtual community of practice, so I know there'll be a lot of activity in that, you know, down the road with folks chiming in and really learning from each other. Is there a hard stop, I'm sorry, on the webinar? Are we at the hour?
Yes, we are at the hour.
Okay. All right. So again, you know, download the fact sheets. Make sure to get more information on the website at mindsthatmoveus.org if your questions were not answered. I think we addressed most of them today. And I'll turn it back to Alicia and Johan for a final close. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Selena. Thank you to our partners, Sharon and Pat, and then to our funder, ECMC Foundation. You know, as we've said throughout the presentation, we are very excited about this project, this challenge, and we're very excited about the ideas that are going to come forth. So, as I mentioned before, think outside of the box in terms of population, team composition, strategies to resolve different barriers that may exist, and we look forward to reading your submissions.
This is Johan. Thanks everyone for participating, and feel encouraged and believe in your idea, and we will believe in it too. Bring it to us, but as you put your idea together and you don't have adult learners identified for your team, there are great resources out there. There's a national group of adult learners called Value USA. There are many state adult learner organizations. Stand Rhode Island is one of them. There are many others. If you don't have a relationship with those organizations, I would encourage you to take advantage of this challenge to establish that relationship and partner with them. So with that, thank you for participating, and I hope everyone is going to have a great weekend.
And thank you, Selena.